Have you ever felt this, like, sudden, almost violent wave of anxiety hit you right when things were actually starting to go well?
Oh, that is such a common experience.
Right. Picture this. You get that promotion you've been working years for, or, you finally meet a partner who treats you with genuine respect.
You should be thrilled.
Exactly. By all accounts, you should be popping champagne, but instead, your stomach just drops. Your heart rate
Yeah.
spikes.
Yeah, you get that intense impending sense of doom.
Yes. Or maybe it manifests differently for you. Maybe you find yourself hitting this invisible, impenetrable break every single time you try to launch a new project.
Or set a boundary, even.
Right. You have the business plan drafted, you have the energy, you know all the steps, but something deep inside your chest just, well, it pulls the emergency brake.
It is a profoundly disorienting experience. And, people usually internalize it immediately.
Oh, for sure.
The immediate reaction is to assume it's a fundamental character flaw.
The inner monologue goes straight to, what is wrong with me? Why am I self-sabotaging my own happiness again?
You feel entirely responsible for your own paralysis.
Completely.
Hmm.
But that assumption is exactly what we are dismantling today. We're looking at a truly eye-opening set of psychological source materials focused on a concept called injunctions.
This is such a fascinating framework.
It really is. So the mission for this deep dive is to uncover how these invisible rules, these deeply prohibitive, restrictive messages, were installed in our nervous systems in the first place.
Right, how they actually got there.
Yeah, we're going to decode 14 specific messages that are quietly stealing your confidence behind the scenes.
And then, most crucially, we're going to talk about how to fix it.
Exactly. We're going to walk through the physical, scientifically grounded steps to overwrite this inherited programming so you can actually reclaim the driver's seat of your life.
What's fascinating here is the origin of these roadblocks. When that sudden wave of anxiety hits, or, when that invisible brake engages, the voice in your head telling you to stop.
The one that sounds just like me.
Yeah, that one. It doesn't actually belong to you.
Which feels completely counterintuitive. I mean, it's in my head, it's using my voice, so I just assume it's my thought.
Of course you do. But the source material makes a very compelling case that these are, well, they're echoes.
Echoes.
Yeah, they're historical artifacts. What you were experiencing are messages from parents or early caregivers that have simply spent decades masquerading as your own inner voice.
Wow.
They are rigid, survival-based rules about how you are supposed to operate to stay safe in the world.
So today we are exploring how to surgically separate your true, authentic self from what is essentially an inherited psychological framework.
Exactly.
Inherited psychological framework. I mean, we need to understand the architecture of that framework before we can tear it down, right?
Right. You have to know how it was built.
So how does a passing sigh or a cold shoulder from 30 years ago hold so much physiological power over a fully grown adult?
It's a great question.
I need to understand the mechanism of how this gets installed in the brain to begin with.
Well, the foundation of this entire concept rests on the evolutionary biology of human childhood.
Okay, biology.
Yeah, consider the sheer, unmatched vulnerability of a human infant compared to almost any other mammal.
Right. Or basically helpless.
Completely. I mean, a foal can stand up and run within hours of being born. A human child is uniquely, absolutely dependent on one or two older humans for years.
Sometimes decades.
Literally. Food, shelter, physical safety, and, the emotional mirroring required to literally grow the brain's prefrontal cortex. All of it comes from the caregiver.
A toddler has zero leverage. I mean, they can't exactly pack their bags and rent a studio apartment if they find their parents' management style toxic.
No, they definitely can't. And because of that non-negotiable dependency, the child's brain is hardwired to adapt to the caregiver's reality at all costs.
Whatever it takes to survive.
Exactly. The child doesn't view the parent as just another flawed human being.
Right.
To the infant nervous system, the parent is this, godlike entity dictating the literal laws of the universe.
So if the parent is unhappy.
If the parent signals that a certain behavior is bad, the child's amygdala records it not as a, minor behavioral correction, but as a universal law of survival.
Because displeasing the caregiver equates to abandonment.
And to an infant, abandonment is death.
Man. So we aren't talking about conscious decision-making here. The child's nervous system is just constantly scanning the environment for threats.
Constant surveillance.
If the parent is the source of survival, predicting the parent's mood is the ultimate survival mechanism. It makes me think of an autoimmune disorder.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison. Say more about that.
Well, with an autoimmune disorder, the body's defense system gets confused, right? It creates these fierce antibodies to attack a perceived threat and keep the body safe.
Right. It's trying to help.
Yeah, but eventually the defense mechanism starts attacking the healthy tissue. As kids, we create these intense behavioral adaptations, these rules to survive the unpredictable moods of our parents.
It was a brilliant defense mechanism at the time.
Exactly. But now, as adults, those same defense mechanisms are attacking our healthy ambitions, our healthy relationships, and our independence.
That is an exceptionally accurate way to visualize it. The adaptations that kept you safe at age 4 are the exact things suffocating you at age 34.
It's brutal.
And the source text points out a crucial dynamic in how these antibodies, or, injunctions, are formed. They are almost never direct verbal commands.
Right, because nobody's parent is sitting them down at age 5 and handing them a manifesto that says, Article 1, you are forbidden from ever feeling joy.
Exactly. It's never that explicit. The installation is entirely subtle. It relies heavily on the power of the unspoken.
Unspoken rules.
Yeah. The coding is transmitted through microexpressions. It's the heavy theatrical sigh when a child tries to pour their own juice and spills a few drops. Oh, the sigh.
Or it's the intense, disproportionate scolding over something completely trivial, like tracking a little bit of mud onto the carpet.
Right. Just totally blowing up over nothing.
Or, perhaps most damaging of all, the cold, withdrawn silence. The withdrawal of affection when the child is being too loud or too needy.
Children are terrifyingly good mood readers. They walk into a room and instantly know the atmospheric pressure.
They have to be. Their survival depends on anticipating that emotional weather. The text highlights that children are hypersensitive to nonverbal cues.
So a look can do more damage than a word.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
A parent's facial expression of disgust or a sudden icy silence pierces the child's psyche far more deeply than a shouted insult.
Wow.
The child unconsciously metabolizes these tiny signs and synthesizes them into rigid binding rules.
Okay, let's unpack this with a coding analogy. It's like our minds are an operating system, and our parents were the original developers.
I like that. Even if they didn't explicitly write, crash the system into the code, their sloppy programming-like sighing when we ask a question left behind, these hidden bugs that just glitch out our adult lives.
That's spot on. The internal logic is flawless, even if it's based on a flawed premise. The child thinks, if I try to build this tower and it falls, mom sighs and looks exhausted.
Right.
Therefore, my attempts at building things drain mom's energy. If mom has no energy, she can't protect me.
Well, leap of logic, but it makes sense to a kid.
Exactly. So the new rule is established: do not attempt to build things.
The child takes 100% of the responsibility for the parent's emotional state. Which, begs the question, what is happening with the parent in these scenarios?
Right.
Why are caregivers sending these restrictive messages in the first place?
Well, the source material delves into the psychology of the controlling parent. In many of these cases, the parents aren't viewing the child as a separate, autonomous being with their own internal world.
They don't see them as a person?
Right. Unconsciously, the parent is using the child as an emotional regulatory tool. The child exists to soothe the parent's unresolved loneliness, their chronic anxiety, or their desperate need for control over an unpredictable world.
The child basically becomes a pacifier for the adult.
That is exactly it. And the child figures out very quickly that love, or at least a temporary ceasefire in the house, is strictly conditional.
You have to earn it.
Affection is only dispensed when the child acts as the parent's emotional puppet. If the child asserts their own will, shows anger, or expresses fear, the affection vanishes.
That's terrifying for a kid.
It creates a lifelong, deeply ingrained somatic habit. The child learns to aggressively suppress their true self, constantly keeping their antenna up to read the room and contort themselves into whatever shape is required to keep the peace.
It's tragic, really, because the natural state of a kid is pure exploration.
Right, they're little scientists.
They're supposed to run around, break things, ask 1,000 irritating questions, fail constantly, and slowly map out how reality works. But under this subtle, suffocating domination, the child just slowly shrinks.
They trade their fundamental autonomy for the illusion of safety. That is the core tragedy the text identifies.
Shrinking to survive.
Yeah. To be loved is to be compliant. That trade-off, that chronic suppression of the vital self, is the fertile soil where the 14 specific injunctions take root and grow into the invisible breaks you feel today.
Okay, so we have the mechanism down. We see how the autoimmune disorder of the mind gets triggered by our dependency and the parent's unresolved trauma.
The setup is complete.
Right. Now, the text divides the 14 resulting injunctions into two distinct categories. The first group is all about suppressing action and emotion.
These are the behavioral breaks that target your agency and your internal emotional compass.
Let's look at the first two, which the text pairs together. Don't do anything and don't execute. On paper, these sound like the result of severe neglect.
You'd think so, yes.
But the text suggests they actually come from the complete opposite direction. These are planted when a parent preemptively does everything for the child.
This dynamic is incredibly insidious because it is usually heavily disguised as intense, loving caregiving. Think of the quintessential helicopter parent.
Right. The parent who packs the bag, manages the calendar, jumps in to finish the math homework the second the kid looks frustrated, and, maybe even speaks for the kid in social situations.
Society applauds that.
Yeah. It looks like hyper-involvement. It looks like devotion. Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. If your parent does all your chores, it looks like good parenting or being helpful. But you're saying it's actually a form of suppression.
Absolutely.
It's like putting a classic car on cinder blocks in a garage to keep it safe. Sure, it doesn't get scratched, but eventually the tires rot and the engine seizes up from not being used.
I love that cinder block analogy because the parent might genuinely believe it is devotion. But if we examine the mechanics of overparenting, the root is often the parent's own unmanageable anxiety, not the child's actual needs.
They just can't stand the discomfort.
Right. The parent cannot tolerate the discomfort of watching their child struggle, so they intervene. But by constantly preventing the child from facing manageable friction, the parent is inadvertently hardwiring a devastating belief into the child's nervous system.
Which is what?
I am inherently incapable.
Oh, wow. Every time the parent swoops in to save the day, the unspoken broadcast is, "You are too fragile to handle this, so I have to do it."
Exactly. The child internalizes a profound sense of incompetence. They never hit the wall, figure out a way over it, and build the confidence that follows.
Because the vital lesson of childhood is learning that you can survive failure, right?
Yes. Resilience isn't built in a vacuum. It is built by messing up, feeling awful about it, and realizing the world didn't end. By stealing the struggle, the parent steals the resilience.
That makes so much sense.
So fast forward 20 years. This person is an adult, sitting at their desk, faced with a new task or a career pivot. Suddenly, the don't execute injunction flares up.
They freeze.
They are paralyzed by an overwhelming fear of inadequacy. They have the blueprint, but they cannot execute because their foundational programming insists they are fundamentally incapable of handling friction.
That reframes perfectionism and procrastination entirely. It's not laziness. It's a terror of execution instilled by a lack of practice with failure.
Precisely.
The text contrasts this nicely with the next injunction, which is don't be a child. This one comes from the opposite end of the spectrum, where the child is forced into a state of hypermaturity.
Right. This injunction is installed when the natural, messy, loud reality of childhood is treated as a moral failing.
Being a kid is suddenly a crime.
A child is naturally playful, sometimes silly, often needy. If a parent reacts to those developmental norms with disgust, mockery, or harsh commands to just grow up, the child receives the message that their basic developmental state is utterly unacceptable.
The kid who is praised for being such a little adult, they are carrying the emotional weight of the household at 8 years old.
Often this occurs in households where the adults are overwhelmed by addiction, mental illness, or severe financial stress.
The parents just don't have the capacity.
Exactly. The parents need the child to be entirely self-sufficient, or worse, they need the child to provide emotional support to them.
Reversing the roles.
The child realizes that being a child is dangerous, so they amputate their playfulness. As adults, these individuals feel intense, crushing guilt the moment they try to relax, take a vacation, or just be spontaneous.
Because they operate under the crushing belief that they must constantly be the responsible one.
Always on duty.
Which brings us to the emotional suppression injunctions. Don't feel and don't show emotions. These seem like the inevitable outcome of not being allowed to be a child.
They are deeply intertwined. Don't feel is established when a child's internal emotional or physical reality is consistently denied, invalidated, or minimized.
Give me an example of that.
A classic example. A child trips, scrapes their knee, and is genuinely distressed. The parent immediately says, "You're fine, it's not that bad, stop crying."
Right. It's such a common reaction. I mean, a lot of well-meaning parents do that just to soothe the kid.
As an isolated incident, it's harmless. But when it becomes a chronic, systematic pattern, Whenever the child is sad, they are told they have no reason to be sad. Whenever they are angry, they are punished for being disrespectful. A profound disconnection occurs.
The child is faced with an impossible conflict.
Right. My body says I am in pain, but the all-knowing caregiver says I am fine. The child has to choose between their own sensory input and the parent's reality.
And to survive, they choose the parent.
They have to. They learn to systematically doubt their own internal reality.
They learn that their own body is lying to them and don't show emotions. The behavioral enforcement of that, I assume.
Yes, don't show emotions applies the heavy brakes to the child's natural physical expressiveness. This happens when a child's crying, or even their loud, exuberant joy is treated as a nuisance.
Joy, too.
Even joy. The underlying message shifts from your feelings are incorrect to your feelings are a direct burden to me.
So the adaptation is the mask. You learn to cultivate a flat, agreeable, unemotional exterior just to keep the adults around you regulated.
And the source material draws a direct physiological connection between these first 5 childhood messages and chronic adult exhaustion.
Exhaustion, really.
The sheer metabolic cost of living this way is astronomical. Think about the mental bandwidth required to constantly suppress your natural impulses, deny your biological needs, ignore your gut feelings, and meticulously monitor your facial expressions so you don't inadvertently inconvenience anyone.
Oh, man. It's like driving a car with one foot on the gas and one foot slammed on the brake.
Yeah.
The engine is screaming, you're burning through fuel, the brake pads are smoking, and you are barely moving forward.
That is a perfect description. People carrying these injunctions grow up to be chronic people pleasers. They're hypersensitive to everyone else's needs while being functionally numb to their own.
Which explains the fatigue.
It leads to a bone-deep, chronic exhaustion that sleep simply cannot cure because the fatigue isn't coming from physical exertion. It is coming from the relentless 24/7 labor of suppressing the self.
Wow. Okay, so if the first group of injunctions is about clipping your wings, this next group is about convincing you that you were never meant to fly at all.
Well said.
The text transitions from behavioral control to existential denial. The remaining 9 injunctions attack identity, connection, and the right to exist.
We are moving into much darker psychological territory here. These injunctions don't just dictate what you do, they dictate who you are allowed to be.
Let's dive into Don't Be You. This seems like a total rejection of the individual.
Don't be you is typically installed through relentless comparison. The parent constantly measures the child against a sibling, a neighbor, or an idealized fantasy in their own head.
Always falling short.
Always. They might repeatedly express disappointment that the child is introverted rather than outgoing, or artistic rather than athletic. Why can't you study like your brother? Or, I always dreamed of having a daughter who loved pageants.
The foundational message is the factory settings you came with are defective.
A complete rejection of the child's innate individuality. The child learns that their authentic self is unlovable, so they construct an entirely fabricated persona to secure affection.
And as an adult.
As adults, this manifests as crippling imposter syndrome. Even when they succeed, they feel fraudulent because they know they achieved it by playing a character, not by being themselves.
That is so common. And then we have Don't Come Near.
This is a profound block on intimacy. It is installed when a parent physically or emotionally recoils when the child seeks comfort.
Recoils, like pulling away.
Yes. The parent might stiffen up when hugged or push the child away when they try to share a vulnerable secret. The parent's body language screams, your need for connection is repulsive.
You can see exactly how that detonates adult relationships.
Oh, completely.
The adult desperately wants a secure attachment with a partner, but their nervous system is flashing red warning lights, convinced that if they show genuine vulnerability, their partner will be disgusted and abandon them.
So they self-sabotage.
They push people away right when they get close.
He creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of isolation.
Now, Don't Succeed is the one that really starts to twist the parent-child dynamic. Why would a parent actively sabotage their child's success?
On a conscious level, most wouldn't. But Don't Succeed usually stems from a parent's deep, unexamined envy, or a feeling of being threatened by the child's potential.
Envy of their own kid.
It happens more than you'd think. Imagine a parent who feels their own life has been a series of failures. When their child achieves something remarkable, gets the lead in the play, wins an academic award, the parent's fragile ego cannot handle it.
So they have to knock them down a peg.
So they pour cold water on the achievement, they change the subject, point out a minor flaw, or attribute the success to dumb luck. You got an A, well, the test must have been easy.
The parent neutralizes the threat by deflating the joy. The child is left feeling a profound sense of guilt for outshining the parent.
The child learns that their success actively harms the person they love most. Fast forward to adulthood. Whenever this person gets close to a major goal, they unconsciously detonate it.
They blow up their own life,
They miss the deadline, bomb the interview, or pick a fight, all to avoid the anticipated rejection that their nervous system associates with success.
which perfectly sets up "don't be healthy." I really struggled with this one in the text. I am genuinely baffled.
It's a difficult one to read.
A parent wanting their kid to be sick violates every evolutionary biological instinct to protect offspring. Wait, why on earth would a parent not want their child to be healthy? That completely contradicts basic human biology. Is it just about needing to feel like a savior?
Your shock is entirely valid, as it runs contrary to every instinct we assume parents possess. But yes, you hit the nail on the head.
So it is about being a savior.
To understand this, we have to look at a dynamic that borders on a mild form of Munchausen by proxy. This twisted injunction occurs when a parent is emotionally vacant, cold, or highly critical when the child is healthy and independent.
Of when they're sick.
The moment the child falls ill, gets injured, or exhibits extreme emotional distress, the parent suddenly transforms. They become warm, doting, incredibly attentive, and deeply involved.
They condition the child to equate physical suffering with love.
The parent is projecting their own profound insecurity. A healthy, robust, independent child does not desperately need the parent.
And if the parent needs to be needed,
For a caregiver whose entire sense of self-worth is tethered to being a savior, a healthy child is an existential threat. By subtly rewarding illness and ignoring health, the parent weaponizes the child's vulnerability.
that is so messed up.
They are communicating, I only have value when you are helpless, therefore to keep me around, you must remain helpless.
That is deeply unsettling. They are basically building a cage of fabricated fragility. So as an adult, if things are going well, this person might unconsciously neglect their physical health.
Yes. They might ignore symptoms, push themselves to burnout, or even manifest psychosomatic illnesses just to recreate that familiar dynamic of being cared for.
The physiological toll is immense. The body literally breaks down to satisfy an old survival rule. It's a tragic adaptation.
It truly is.
Okay, the next grouping is all about isolation. Don't be important, don't belong, don't join in, and be lonely. These seem designed to sever the child's ties to the outside world.
Don't be important reinforces the rule that the child must never outshine the parent's ego.
So how does that look later in life?
The adult result is the employee who does all the work but shrinks into the background during the presentation, terrified to take credit.
Oh, I've seen that so many times.
Don't belong and don't join in occur when the parent criticizes the child's external relationships. If the child makes a new best friend, the parent finds flaws in the friend's family.
Nitpicking everyone else.
Exactly. If they join a sports team, the parent complains endlessly about the driving schedule.
The parent paints the outside world as hostile and burdensome.
The overarching message is, you only belong in this house with me. Everyone else will eventually betray you.
That's incredibly isolating.
This blossoms into adults who feel like perpetual outsiders. They can be at a party surrounded by friends and still feel a profound, chilling sense of alienation.
And be lonely.
Be lonely is the aggressive, deliberate tactic to isolate the child, often through frequent moves or creating dramatic conflicts that scare off the child's friends, ensuring absolute dependency on the caregiver.
Which brings us to the final injunction. The text highlights this as the most severe, most destructive message of all. Don't exist.
This is the absolute darkest depth of human conditioning. Don't exist isn't a critique of a behavior or a personality trait.
It's worse than that.
It is a fundamental rejection of the child's right to occupy space in the universe. This injunction is typically carved into the psyche through severe environments.
Like abuse or neglect.
Yes, chronic domestic violence, profound neglect, or caregivers who explicitly weaponize the child's existence. Statements like, you ruined my life, I wish you were never born, or things were better before you came along.
It's the ultimate annihilation of the self. The physiological toll of carrying that message must be unimaginable.
Children who internalize don't exist face a lifelong battle for basic survival. They struggle with profound, treatment-resistant depression, self-harm, and a literal erosion of the will to live.
They just want to disappear.
They spend their adult lives perpetually apologizing for breathing. They try to take up as little physical and emotional space as possible. It is a devastating burden to carry.
When you look at all 14 of these injunctions laid out together, the sheer weight of it is staggering. If you are listening to this right now and you recognize these patterns in your own life, if you can trace your anxiety, your exhaustion, or your self-sabotage back to these invisible breaks, it is very easy to feel irreparably damaged.
It feels permanent.
It feels like this programming is woven into the very fabric of your DNA. But the text doesn't just leave us in the ruins, thankfully. The entire second half of this material is dedicated to the antidote.
The way out.
Yes, it outlines a highly specific neurological mechanism for uninstalling this programming.
And the first non-negotiable step in that uninstall process is recognizing the grand illusion.
The grand illusion. Break that down for us.
The most dangerous thing about injunctions is their camouflage. When you hear that negative voice in your head, it does not sound like your mother criticizing your weight or your father sighing at your report card.
It sounds like me.
Over decades, that voice has perfectly mimicked your own internal monologue. When you think, I'm going to fail this interview or I don't deserve this relationship, it feels like an organic, original thought.
But it's not.
But it is an illusion. It is a ghost. It is a recorded tape from 20 years ago, triggered by stress, playing on a loop in your prefrontal cortex.
Okay, understanding it's a tape is one thing, but how do we actually stop it from playing?
The text provides a very concrete behavioral methodology called the strategy of declaration, utilizing what it refers to as opposite words.
Opposite words. The premise sounds simple. Once you identify your core injunction, let's say it's don't succeed, you create a declarative phrase that states the exact opposite.
Correct.
So you would declare, from now on, I will succeed,
Us.
or I am allowed to enjoy my success. If the injunction is don't be you, the opposite word is, from now on, I am me, and that is enough.
Exactly.
And if it's the severe don't exist, the declaration becomes, I am fundamentally an important existence. I have a right to be here.
The phrasing is simple, but the mechanism of action requires rigorous physical execution. The text is incredibly adamant on this point. You cannot just think these positive thoughts in your head.
Like, really?
Internal silent affirmation is completely insufficient to rewrite the programming.
Okay, I have to push back on this. I'm reading this part of the text, and it sounds dangerously close to toxic positivity.
I hear that a lot.
Muttering affirmations in my car while I commute feels a bit, I don't know, ridiculous. If the psychological damage is in the mind, why isn't the fix purely cognitive?
Yeah.
How does just saying words aloud override 2 decades of complex childhood trauma?
That is the exact skepticism most people feel. It sounds too simple. But we have to look at the neuroscience of how the trauma was installed in the first place.
Okay, lay it on me.
The original injunctions were not installed via telepathy. They were intense sensory experiences. You physically heard a harsh tone of voice. You visually processed a facial expression of disgust.
I felt the physical withdrawal of affection.
Exactly. Your nervous system felt it. These experiences fired neurons together, and over time, according to Hebb's law, neurons that fired together wire together, they created deep, physical neural pathways in your brain.
It's like a deeply rutted dirt road. Water will always flow down the deepest rut.
That's a perfect analogy. To build a new pathway, you cannot just visualize a new road, you have to physically pave it. Engaging the physical body is how we force neuroplasticity.
So the talking does something physical.
When you speak the opposite words aloud, you are utilizing multiple sensory systems simultaneously. You are moving your mouth and jaw, which engages the motor cortex.
Right.
Your vocal cords vibrate, stimulating the vagus nerve, which signals safety to your nervous system. Your auditory cortex physically processes the sound of your own voice, dictating a new reality.
Ah, I see. You are creating a real-time sensory feedback loop. You are forcing your brain to physically experience a new truth.
Exactly. The logic relies entirely on volume and repetition. Think about the sheer volume of negative reinforcement you received over your entire childhood. Thousands of microexpressions, thousands of sighs.
It adds up.
You have to match and eventually exceed that volume with your new declarations. You weave them into the mundane moments of your day. You mutter them while making coffee, say them aloud in the shower, repeat them on your drive to work.
So what does this all mean? It's like trying to learn a totally foreign language, the
Yeah.
language of self-worth. At first, you're just awkwardly repeating phrases like a tourist reading phonetically from a guidebook. It feels completely unnatural. You stand in the mirror saying, I have a right to take up space, and your brain immediately screams, liar.
Right, it feels totally wrong.
But you have to keep parroting it until you actually start dreaming in that language.
The text specifically addresses this exact friction. It warns you that initially, these opposite words will feel entirely fake. You might feel a tightness in your chest, a spike in anxiety, or even a sense of profound embarrassment just saying them alone in your bedroom.
Because your nervous system thinks you're breaking a survival rule. Your amygdala is firing, thinking if you say you are important, the caregiver will abandon us and we will die.
That is precisely what is happening. Your body is mounting a threat response to an outdated threat. This is why the mechanical, almost clinical repetition of this practice is so crucial.
It's reps in the gym.
Exactly. It is not about achieving some sudden mystical state of self-love where the words magically feel true. It is about sheer, repetitive neurobiological conditioning.
Paving the new road.
You are laying down new pavement over the old ruts. You must persist through that initial friction, ignoring the body's false alarms, until the neural pathways strengthen and the words finally begin to overlap with your internal reality.
So you're doing the physical work. You're speaking the words aloud, pushing through the imposter syndrome, and rewiring the auditory loops.
Yes.
How do you know if it's actually working? What does it feel like when the programming starts to break? And realistically, what happens when you inevitably stumble?
Well, the source material provides a brilliant, highly specific marker of healing. It describes a phenomenon we can call the quiz-answer check moment.
A quiz answer check. What does that feel like?
There will come a moment in your recovery when a memory of receiving an injunction bubbles up, but instead of that memory triggering a wave of shame or a drop in your stomach, you find yourself looking at it objectively.
Objectively. Like it happened to someone else.
As if you are checking the answers to a quiz you took 20 years ago.
A sense of detachment.
Complete emotional distance. Instead of thinking, I was so terrible because my parent yelled at me, you suddenly look at the memory and think, wow, I cannot believe an adult said such cruel things to a defenseless 6-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Or you realize the parent who ignored me was actually deeply unwell themselves. Their reaction was entirely about their own trauma, not my worth.
The camera pulls out. You are no longer trapped inside the memory. You are in the director's chair observing it. You realize the rules imposed on you were absurd.
It is incredibly freeing.
That sounds incredibly liberating. But let's ground this in reality for a second. Healing is never a clean, upward trajectory.
Never.
What happens when someone does this work for 6 months, feels great, and then suddenly has a massive panic attack before a job interview and cancels the whole thing? I know a lot of people, myself included, who feel like absolute failures if they have a panic attack after a year of feeling great.
Right. The shame spirals.
It's great, I'm back at square one. But you're saying it's more like a rubber band stretching. The snapback is just physics, not a moral failing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is perhaps the most vital warning the text offers. The absolute inevitability of relapse.
Inevitability. So it will happen.
It will happen. The text explicitly states that when your system is compromised, when you are physically sick, sleep-deprived, or under a severe amount of psychological stress like a breakup or a work crisis, you will feel pulled backward into your old negative thought patterns.
The old injunctions will flare up with a vengeance.
The neurobiology supports your rubber band analogy perfectly. Under extreme stress, the human brain is designed to conserve energy by defaulting to its oldest, most deeply myelinated neural pathways.
The deepest ruts in the road.
Exactly. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline and your primitive brain takes over. It says, we are under threat. Execute the original survival code immediately.
Even if that survival code is don't succeed or don't exist.
Precisely. Because to your oldest brain structures, that code kept you alive when you were 5. This regression, the sudden snapback, is not a failure of character or a sign that your healing is a sham.
That is so good to hear.
It is a completely natural, predictable, physical reflex. When the body is depleted, the mind seeks the path of least resistance.
So how do we handle the snapback without spiraling into shame? Because the shame is heavy.
The directive from the text is to expect the wave, observe it, and refuse to fight it.
Refuse to fight it.
When you feel yourself slipping back into old self-sabotaging patterns, the most destructive thing you can do is pile on self-blame. Beating yourself up reinforces the injunction that you are fundamentally flawed.
Right.
Instead, you observe the physical reality. You say, my immune system is compromised, I'm stressed, and my brain has temporarily booted up the old tape. And then, quietly, methodically, and without a drop of self-judgment, you return to vocalizing your opposite words.
You just pick up the language guidebook again and start reading.
Exactly. The real mental muscle isn't built when things are easy. It is built in the moment of relapse. Every single time you snap back to the wall and gently, patiently guide yourself back out by speaking your new declarations, you are reinforcing the new foundation.
Proving you're safe.
You are proving to your nervous system that the old rules do not own you anymore. Expecting the waves and not fighting them is actually what accelerates recovery.
Expect the waves.
Mhm.
That is profoundly forgiving. Okay, so we have the tools to rewrite the past using our opposite words. And we know how to navigate the present by expecting the relapse and giving ourselves grace.
Yes.
The final step the text outlines is setting the stage for the future. How do we build an external life that supports this new internal operating system?
It requires two things: a fundamental reframing of how you view your own history and a ruthless, unapologetic curation of your environment.
Okay, let's start with a reframing.
The text insists that this phase begins with a radical act of self-acknowledgement,
Acknowledging what exactly?
your own immense strength. People who have spent their lives under the thumb of these injunctions often view themselves as weak, broken, or chronically defective.
They feel like they failed.
But the reality is the exact opposite. Surviving these intense psychological injunctions for decades is proof of incredible, profound resilience.
You were fighting a psychological war you didn't even know you were drafted into.
Consider the environment. You were subjected to a barrage of psychological suppression from the very people you relied on for physical survival. Yet you maintained a core of self-preservation.
You kept going.
You kept going, you sought out resources, you are listening to this analysis, you are actively doing the work to heal. To have survived that childhood environment without completely extinguishing your inner spark is a monumental achievement.
Wow.
The text urges you to stop dismissing your past self. You must actively declare, I did incredibly well to make it this far. I am remarkably strong.
It shifts the entire narrative. You stop viewing yourself as a fragile victim who needs fixing and start viewing yourself as a resilient survivor who is finally ready to thrive.
And once you claim that strength, you must use it to protect your space. The text is absolute on this. The power of your environment cannot be overstated. You must actively, consciously distance yourself from binding environments.
It sounds like we need to do a relationship audit. You're repeating your opposite words every morning, but then going to work or going home to people who enforce the old don't be important rule. You're just bailing out a leaky boat, right?
That is exactly right. You cannot heal effectively in the same environment that is actively making you sick. You must choose safe places and safe human relationships.
Which is terrifying for someone whose foundational programming says don't belong or be lonely. Their brain tells them that isolation is the only safe environment.
It is terrifying, which is why that prior acknowledgement of your own strength is the prerequisite. But when you finally begin surrounding yourself with trustworthy people, colleagues who respect your autonomy, friends who celebrate your successes without envy, a partner who allows you to express anger or sadness without withdrawing their love, it acts as a massive accelerator for the healing process.
Because it proves the old rules wrong.
Those healthy, real-time interactions provide the empirical evidence your brain needs to prove your opposite. Opposite words are actually true. They help the new declarations settle into your nervous system much faster.
So, for the listener feeling overwhelmed by the idea of blowing up their entire life overnight, what is the starting point?
The text advises focusing on micro-choices. You do not need to quit your job and move to a new city tomorrow. It starts with setting one small boundary at work.
All right, small steps.
Choosing to spend a Sunday morning doing exactly what you want to do, rather than what your extended family expects you to do. Speaking up when someone interrupts you in a meeting.
Little rebellions.
Exactly. These small daily choices that prioritize your own emotional reality will steadily, systematically erode the power of the old injunctions.
Death by 1,000 tiny acts of self-advocacy.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of this material is true freedom. Freedom means recognizing that the rest of your life does not have to be governed by a set of frantic survival-based rules that an overwhelmed caregiver handed to you when you were a toddler.
It really doesn't.
For decades, you may have carried a crushing burden of shame, assuming you were just inherently broken. But knowing the true name of your struggle, knowing that these are installed injunctions, not character traits, lifts that burden entirely.
It changes everything.
It allows you to step out of the shadows, drop the script you were handed, and walk into a life where you are the protagonist.
The protagonist of your own life. That is the ultimate reclamation. To stop playing a bit part in someone else's unhealed trauma and start writing your own lines.
The tools are in your hands. The physical, auditory practice of the opposite words, the neurobiological grace during a relapse, and the ruthless curation of your environment.
We have covered some incredibly deep, heavy, and profound ground today. We started by mapping the invisible rules, the survival adaptations we made in the face of our childhood vulnerability.
It's a lot to process.
It is. We exposed the 14 specific injunctions, moving from the behavioral breaks that suppress our actions and emotions all the way down into the dark existential depths of don't be you and don't exist.
The real heavy hitters.
Yeah. And we learned that the way out isn't passive cognitive therapy. It is active, physical neuroplasticity. We have to engage our vocal cords in our ears to speak a new reality into existence, matching the volume of our past with the volume of our present.
Paving the new road.
Exactly. We learn to expect the biological snapback of relapse, to forgive ourselves when stress pulls us backward, and to slowly, purposefully curate our environments and audit our relationships to protect our newly rewritten code.
As a final reminder from the source text, the sheer fact that you are engaging with this material right now, that you are actively trying to learn, grow, and decode your own nervous system, is absolute, undeniable proof of that immense surviving strength we discussed.
Hear, hear.
The old programming did not extinguish you. You have the power, starting right now, to curate a safe environment for your newly reclaimed self.
You really do. You have already survived the absolute hardest part of your life. The rest is just rebuilding. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, mind-expanding question to chew on long after we sign off.
Oh, I love these.
We spent this entire time identifying the negative, restrictive rules that have held you back. But think about the broader implications. If the harshest criticisms you hold against yourself, the absolute deepest, most painful beliefs you have about your own flaws and limitations, are actually just someone else's outdated, buggy programming, well, what other fundamental truths about your limits are completely made up?
That is a powerful question.
And who would you become if you decided to wipe the slate entirely clean, starting today?